People who their livelihood depends on their ability to connect with nature, to understand what's happening with the weather and the change of seasons. These are people who know for a fact when they see particular clouds coming in particular ways, they know it will rain. When the wind is coming from a particular direction, they know it's going to be hot. They know when to plant their crops. They know when to harvest their crops. They are so good at being in tune with these natural signs, they predict the future. And because they were making money and able to feed themselves and their entire country, they must have been pretty good at it. They knew what God was going to do before God was doing it.
Sorry, God brought the sun in.
But when it came to interpreting their present moment in history, they didn't have a clue. They had no idea. Jesus calls them hypocrites, not because they are doing one thing and saying another. Jesus calls them hypocrites because they follow their lines. They play their part. They're so in tune with the natural rhythm of things, with a society that works in a particular way, that as soon as things start to change, suddenly father and son are just words. They're just roles that are played. And the actual people inhabiting those roles, they go to battle with each other. Mother and daughter are no longer connected through love and service. They now are fighting about how to run a household. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. One of the most beautiful stories in our entire scripture is the story of Ruth and Naomi. Ruth and Naomi were mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They were bonded together through the gift of commitment and love and service to one another. It's one of the most sacred stories that the Jewish people tell, that we tell. And Jesus is saying that in the coming time, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law will go against each other. They will be divided from one another. And in fact, that's why Jesus came. Jesus came to the earth to bring fire that he wishes was already kindled and to drive division, not to bring peace, but the sword. It's a scary text. It's weighty, it's heavy, it raises the anxiety in the room. But I really believe that what Jesus is saying in this teaching is that society as we know it is changing. And with the coming of Jesus, Jesus is here to show us how to be more fully human. As everything collapses and changes around us, Jesus is going to show us what it means to be more fully human. When you are more fully human, you are connected to the earth and you are connected to the God whose image we were made in. To be more fully, more wholly human is to be filled with so much love and forgiveness and mercy and grace, just like God is, that it pours out of us like light from the sun. To be more fully human is to live every day of our lives, not collecting and hoarding for ourselves, but giving and being in service to others. This is what it looks like for Jesus. This is what it looks like for us, to be more fully human. And when you start waking up and living and thinking and feeling as a more whole human, you stop playing your part. And you stop saying the lines that we were all scripted to say just because we've always been taught to say them. You stop going with the flow just because that's what we've always done. And you start thinking and feeling and acting for yourself. Living into more compassion and more grace and mercy for all people. And when we start living that way, it creates division. Human beings always fear conflict. It's built into us. We want an easy way forward. We don't want conflict. We don't want to fight. We don't want war. And the scary part about following Jesus is that Jesus showed us what it is to be fully human. To love and serve and sacrifice and forgive over and over and over, even when we are being dragged to our death. To follow in the way of Jesus is to end up becoming divided from someone for the sake of loving and serving others. You know, the opposite of hypocrite, the opposite of being an empty suit, an empty shell of a person who just follows with the lines, who just goes with the flow, the opposite of that is to be a full, whole person. And the ancient word we have for that is integrity. To build up our own integrity is to be weighty and hefty, is to live a life of purpose and meaning. And when you're filled with values, when you're filled with stuff that you would rather die for than live without, you're no longer this empty shell of a person. You're no longer just a mask or a suit. You're no longer just somebody who just says all the right lines, regardless of who gets hurt. Jesus is calling us to be these hefty, integral, whole human beings. And the way we get there, the way we follow Jesus and do that work, has everything to do with how we grow faithfully, how we grow spiritually. In this place, we say we are growing in faith. We say that we are inspiring spiritual growth. But what does that growth look like? How do we do it? Our teaching today gives us a few things to reflect on. Living in a world full of hypocrites, living in a society and a culture that is more divided from one another than we ever have been before, living in a world surrounded by people who say the right lines and wear the right clothes and play their part, regardless of who gets hurt, regardless of how we feel about it. Living in an epidemic of hollow people, our faith, our spirituality calls us to grow from the inside, to grow integrally, to grow more whole, more full. And I can give you some examples of what I mean, because I have spent my life plagued by hypocrites, as all of you have too. But I get to stand up here, and I have the honor of sharing stories with you, so you're going to have to hear about some of my hypocrites that I've run into and dealt with. And we'll start with a really funny one, because I can tell he could use a laugh. Anytime Jesus is talking about bringing the fire to earth, we got to giggle a little bit, or we throw stuff at the pastor. So, here is a very real story. Here's a completely 100% true story from my own life. 20 years ago, I was in college, at Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. And at that time in my life, I was a teetotaler. I did not want anything to do with drinking or drugs or parties. It spelled bad news for me, so I avoided it like the plague. Now, I don't know if you've ever lived on a tiny private college campus stuck in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. But if you have, then you know it's really difficult to come up with stuff to do that doesn't involve drinking. And my friends and I, we were really good at it. We came up with all kinds of things to do. And one particular Friday night, we decided to go north to the wilds of Madison, Wisconsin, to attend our first ever monster truck rally. I'm not kidding. I don't know how many Friday nights have existed between that one and my current life. None of them have been as satisfying. None of them. Going to that monster truck rally was one of the most incredible things I've ever done. The corn dogs, delicious. The people, amazing and interesting. They built a truckosaurus. Do you know what a truckosaurus is? It is a dinosaur made out of trucks that they can operate to make it bend over and eat other trucks. Most incredible thing I've ever done. The following Monday, this is why I know it was a Friday. The following Monday, I get a phone call in my dorm room from the secretary of the Dean of Residential Life. And the secretary says, is this Brian Gruhn? And I said, yes. And she said, you need to make an appointment to meet with the Dean of Residential Life. And I said, why? And she said, I'm not allowed to tell you, but you know what you did. I didn't know, but so I scheduled the appointment. I go in and I walk into the dean's office and he says, sit down. So I sat down and he said, do you have anything to say to me? And I said, my name is Brian Gruhn. I'm from Arizona. We've never met before. I don't know. And he said, come on, fess up. It's like, sir, I honestly have no idea what you want me to say. And he said, come on. In college, you make stupid mistakes, you do things you're not supposed to, at least own up to it, take responsibility for it. And I said, sir, I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. You have no idea that last Friday night, you went out drinking at the frat party and started a fist fight with several other students and then ran away from security and made them chase you all the way back to your dorm. No, that didn't happen. That's not me. I have no idea what you're talking about. And he said, I was worried this would happen, so I took the liberty of showing they had a Facebook page before actual Facebook, and he said, I showed all the faces of the people who live in your dorm to our security officer who was chasing that person down, and without hesitating, he pointed right to your face and he said, that's the one. And I said, well, let me show you evidence of my own. Here is me, Friday night, at the time of this incident, and there is Truckosaurus in the background. That didn't actually happen. But instead, I sat there having no idea what to say, just knowing that I didn't do what I was being accused of. And I said, sir, I've never touched alcohol in my life. I've never picked a fight. You will never find me around a fraternity house of any kind. This is not me. You have the wrong person. He insisted that I didn't. So then I went home in tears, because I had never been in trouble with anyone before, and now I'm being accused for something I legitimately did not do. And then my friends, somebody did take a picture of us at the Monster Truck Rally, and I did find the timestamp in that photo, and I circled it, and I sent the picture into his office, and I never heard from the Dean of Residential Life ever again. He never apologized. Although, I did apply for jobs in that office later on in my college career, and I got every single job I ever applied for. I don't know if the two things are connected or not. But anyway, hypocrite. This was a guy following a script. The script is, I'm the person in authority, something went wrong, we don't know who to hold accountable, we'll drag somebody, I have no idea what the story was, we'll drag somebody in, we'll blame them for it. He just had no idea that for the first time in my life, I was filled with like Truckosaurus integrity. I was like, I know I did not do this. Hypocrites follow the script, regardless of whether or not it makes sense, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. Several years ago, I was living in the Boston area, and it was late at night, and I was waiting for a train to take me home. And we were at the end of the train line, and this young woman showed up with a bicycle and this huge piece of furniture. I don't even know what it was. She had bought it that day at a garage sale, and it was tied to her bike. And I started asking her questions. I was like, hi, what is this? It became clear that she was from another country, and English was definitely not her first language, and it was difficult to communicate. And so the train pulled up, and I got on, and I helped her get her bicycle with this huge giant piece of furniture attached to it. We get it on the train, when suddenly we hear, get that off my train! And the conductor got out of his seat and came back and said, there are no bicycles allowed on this train. It's late at night. It was storming outside. He just wanted to make her leave her bike there with her stuff. And I said, sir, come on, surely it's late at night, we're the only people here, surely this can't be that big a deal. He goes, rules are rules, get that bike off this train. And so she did, and I refused to leave her alone, and so I waited with her for the next train to come, having no idea what we were going to do, because rules are rules, the rules weren't going to change in the next 5 minutes. But sure enough, that train pulls up, and a much older conductor opens the door and looks out on us. And we say, sir, is it okay if she brings her bicycle on the train? And he looks at her with the look of an older father. You can tell this guy had kids of his own. He's seen kids in trouble before. He looked at her in the face and said, what are we going to do? Leave you here all night? Get on the train. Rules are rules. If you're somebody who can only follow the rules, if you're someone who doesn't feel enough for your fellow human or think enough for yourself to know when to disregard rules, sure, rules are rules and they can't be broken. Unless you have enough integrity, unless you have enough spirituality and love and grace and forgiveness inside yourself that you can then share with others who may or may need. One more story. Not funny. My parents got divorced when I was 5 years old, so I've had a lot of different step families in my life. And at one point, my father was married to a woman whose family was from Mexico. And she had a son-in-law named Bobby. Bobby was also of Mexican descent. They lived in Bisbee, Arizona. I grew up in Sierra Vista, like half an hour away from me. Bobby was an amazing cop. He was older than I was, and I always really respected him. And after September 11th, 2001, people decided that we needed checkpoints on the border. I grew up there for 19 years. There were no checkpoints, not like this. But after 9/11, they insisted on having these checkpoints at the border where they were set up on the highway, blocking the only way in or out of town. And you had to present some form of ID to prove that you were a U.S. citizen in order to pass the checkpoint. I'm pasty white. They've never, ever in my, what's it been, nearly 20 years, they've never, ever once asked to see my driver's license. The number, no matter how many times I've driven through there. One Saturday morning, I saw Bobby at the family house, and Bobby shared a story with me that a couple nights before, he had been driving through that very checkpoint, off duty, so he wasn't wearing his uniform, and they saw brown skin and a man with a dark complexion, and they demanded to see proof of U.S. citizenship. And Bobby said, I have to tell you, I have 3 things on me: my driver's license, my badge, I'm a police officer in Bisbee, Arizona, and I have my weapon on me. I need to tell you that right now. And without saying another word, they yelled, "Gun!" And they pulled him out of the car, and they put him on the ground, and they harassed him for quite some time before finally choosing to let him go. And when Bobby told me the story, I was so filled with rage. And I was so sad for this guy who's one of the most amazing men, who gives up so much of his own time with his family to serve his community. And I said, Bobby, how can you stand working to serve a community that treats you like that just because of the color of your skin? And I will never in my life forget what Bobby said to me in response. Bobby said to me, Brian, I love my community. I serve with honor. The men I ran into that night are pretenders. These were people who wore the right clothes. They knew their lines. And they said them, regardless of who it was. You don't need me to tell you that we live in an age of division. You do not need me to point out all the different conflicts and all the different arguments and fights that we're having in this country about all manner of different things. But maybe we need some help interpreting the moment in which we live, interpreting the present moment. And I would suggest to you this. We currently live in a time where it's never been easier to be a hypocrite. It's never been easier to say all the right things and wear the right clothes and play the part in society that you're supposed to play and then just do whatever you want. It's never been easier to say some things and not be held accountable for anything. It's never been easier to shirk your responsibility for the things that you had promised you would say and do. It's never been easier. We are not the first generation of human beings to run into this problem, not by far. But I honestly believe it's never been easy to do those things. And so what it says to me is that we are in deep, desperate need of a new spirituality. A spirituality that is going to help us grow in faith, to grow more whole as human beings, to carry around enough integrity inside of us so that we know when to change the script, so that we know when to hold people accountable, so that we know how to take responsibility for ourselves and our own actions. So what might such a spirituality look like? Well, we have some guideposts. We have some things that we know. There was an older spirituality, a spirituality that served us well. It was wonderful for its time. It was a kind of spirituality that focused on belief, insisting that everyone believed the same thing, believed the right thing. It was a spirituality that was really focused on morality, dividing the good people from the bad people. And it was a kind of spirituality that was very invested in distancing us from God. God's over there, we are here. Humans are dirty and flawed, and only God is righteous and good. Humans are incapable of doing the right thing. So that spirituality is what it is. It's served its time, and it has helped a lot of people hide behind looking good, and pretending to be good while doing whatever they want and forget that they were made in the image of God. So instead, I say we start practicing a new spirituality. And what I love about this church is we are already doing this, whether we articulate it or not. We are already practicing a new spirituality. One that focuses on celebrating our full humanity. We're not concerned with good or bad. We're concerned with being a full human being with a functioning brain and a functioning heart. It's a spirituality that says it doesn't matter what you believe nearly as much as who you are living for, who you are serving. It's a spirituality that says you are put on this earth to love and serve all people of every category of person. Love and serve them all to the best of your ability. We don't care what you think. We don't care what you believe nearly as much as we care about how you are loving and serving other people. And it's a spirituality that tries to bring us closer with the divine maker who created all of us in God's image. Not to separate us, not to keep us at a distance. A spirituality that says Jesus came to earth, the divine in human form, to demonstrate what our full humanity can look like. Love and service at all costs, even if you're being dragged to the cross. Friends, the good news is that God is on the way. The good news is that God is already here. There's conflict, there's division, there's anxiety. And it's all happening because something is falling apart and we don't know what the thing is that will replace it. But Jesus has taught us for 2,000 years that every time it will be God's love, God's mercy, God's grace. That will be what saves us every single time. Thanks be to God for such gifts. And thanks be to God for a community of people that can practice growing together, to prepare together for the world that God is going to make.